Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We still have a couple minutes until we're gonna start, so please just sit tight and we'll kick it off with the introduction from Tim. Hey y'all, thanks for joining. We're gonna wait a couple more minutes, let people make their way in, and then we'll get started.
All right, we're right about 1 Mountain Time. I think people might continue to join, but I think we have a tight schedule and a lot that we want to get through in the next couple of hours, so don't want to delay us from the get-go. Thank you everyone for joining. We're really happy to have everyone online with us today, and we will be recording this session as well to make it available for you and others who may have registered and are unable to attend. Yeah, I want to kick things off by passing things to Tim Asal with BLM. Kristen and I will introduce ourselves as we come to our portion of this session from on the DRI side, but wanted to pass things to Tim Asal to kind of set the stage for what we've been working on with BLM over the last several years. And yeah, Tim, take it away.
Hey, thank you, Eric and Kristen, and good afternoon to everyone that has joined and those that are currently joining. So I'm Tim Asal. I work out of the National Operations Center, where I'm the Remote Sensing Coordinator for the Assessment, Inventory, and Monitoring, or AIM program. I think most folks on the call are probably familiar with that. And before we dive into the training here, I just wanted to mention a few points about how this collaboration came about and how this work fits in with our priorities, etc. And so the origins or the pioneers of this collaboration, if you will, started with Sarah Peterson, who began this work when she was in the state office in Nevada. She's now the Deputy Center Director for the Nevada Water Science Center with GS. Alden Shellcross then championed this work during his time with the BLM in Montana, and he continues to be connected through the collaboration with Climate Engine and Riverscapes. And finally, Nikki Cutler in Nevada has also continued support in that state. Then several headquarters programs invested in this. And so this is not only AIM that's invested in this, but also the range and aquatics programs. And there's a number of people involved. I'll mention a few, although I hope I don't leave any out. And that's Scott Miller and Paula Cotillo, Emily Kajirgis, Justin Shirley, and Jessica Phillips were the primary drivers behind that headquarters investment. So why this collaboration? Well, as programs within this agency, we have a number of priorities, and monitoring is one of those common themes among them. And I'd argue that we're all working toward the common goal of distilling big data into knowledge to empower our natural resource managers. And I think this collaboration today represents much of that. Within AIM, integration with remote sensing is one of our priorities. And to achieve that, we have three primary AIM remote sensing principles, and those are scientific relevance, communicating data and workflows for decision makers, and fostering collaboration. Collaboration is obviously key for so many reasons, but one of those that I'll focus on right now is limited bandwidth. And many of us in the BLM, I think, are feeling that maybe more so now than ever before. So this is a massive help when it comes to that. Thinking about big data, right? We have more data than ever before. Maybe it's even more than a little overwhelming. Some have even called it the deluge from space when we're talking about remote sensing data. And that's fantastic that we're at this point. We're at this point in time, but with that comes a lot of challenges. And with those challenges, we need to meet those in various ways. One of those is getting this big data in a digestible form for our managers to be able to make decisions. And that can be challenging. Okay, so one of the things I just want to mention as well in terms of how we use this information, and Eric and Kristen will get into more of these details in just a sec, but primarily the two primary ways right now are through the Climate Engine reports, and they'll go through those, and we have those set up in a number of ways. I suspect a fair number of people on this call are familiar with those. And then the other is through the Climate Engine app. And I was going to prepare a list of like some really big picture questions that you could answer with the app. Eric and Kristen are going to cover that, so I'll spare you some of those details. But the one thing I will say is I think that the Climate Engine app is currently underutilized. I myself, I play with it a lot, and I feel like I'm just finally getting to that potential. Whenever I've given a little demonstration to people that showing them this app, generally it's often met with, wow, I didn't realize we could do that. I had no idea. And so I encourage you all to listen closely during that time. And this is something that I can't stress enough. It's not just a few derived data sources that are in this app. It's not just the fractional vegetation cover products. And those in their own right represent, massive data sets from a massive amount of science that goes into that. But there's also just a ton of information, whether it's satellite data, whether it's climate data, again, collectively big data. Those of us that are, I won't go, I don't want to date myself too much, but those of us that have worked in remote sensing for a long time know the days before Google Earth Engine, before the cloud, and how we did things very differently. And running through this Climate Engine app, it elicits a few different feelings from me. One is, I'm impressed by the sheer power of this. The other is a little bit of envy of all the sort of work that many of us had to learn to go through all this that is essentially not really needed anymore because of this. So the Climate Engine app, in my opinion, it's one of the primary uses for it is it's exploratory data analysis on steroids. And it's amazing what we can think about. So the other thing I want to mention, again, going into these challenges, I'm not going to go into this too much. We have a lot of different platforms that we can serve geospatial data in. We have a lot of different users that use different platforms for a whole variety of reasons. This is one of our solutions. We are, however, some of what you'll see today. We are, however, working on additional solutions for the future. And for those of you that are Esri users, one of those is to be able to tap into this big data cloud directly from ArcGIS Pro. We're not there yet, but we think some of that is coming. And for those of you that are power users in other ways, There are additional ways to access this data through the Climate Engine API, etc. We won't go into that today. Okay, so finally, some specifics with respect to today's training. Today's training is a broad foundational training, and there'll be more to come with respect to deeper thematic information. So sometime this fall, we expect to offer 3 more deeper trainings, and those will be centered around riparian and wetland, upland vegetation, as well as drought and vegetation productivity. So the slides from today's training will be shared, as well as Eric already mentioned, it will be recorded. We all learn in different ways, so please don't fret if you feel like you can't keep up and work alongside. In the slides, there will be links that will take you to dynamic examples so you can work through them on your own pace. And this is because this is a cloud-based product and it's available to anyone at any time. If anyone has questions, please type them into the chat. I will do my best to answer those myself or others on the call that work with our collaboration. I'll do my best to answer those in the chat. But there will, as we'll see in a minute here with Eric's and Kristen's schedule, there will be some breaks between topical changes, and we might interject there and answer them as well. So please be patient, but please ask away. Okay, thank you all for listening to my spiel. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Eric. Eric, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah, we're really excited to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This session is called Tools for Accessing, Analyzing, and Visualizing Climate and Remote Sensing Data for Reporting and Decision Support. And we're going to be focusing on Climate Engine tools kind of throughout this and kind of introducing all of you to Climate Engine. We don't assume any sort of background understanding of Climate Engine. This is meant to, build your experience and understanding from the ground up. And so is certainly suitable for beginners. Before we get started, I did just want to cover a few housekeeping items. First, that this meeting will be recorded and will be provided following the training. Second, to follow along with this session, you will need a Climate Engine account. So Kristen sent out an email on Monday. If you haven't created the Climate Engine account, you can follow those instructions to do so. With any questions, we have the Q&A tab available where you can submit questions, and we'll be monitoring those and addressing them either in the chat or live on session, depending on the question. And then to Tim's point that he brought up, we're going to be covering a lot of material in this session. We typically provide these sessions as half-day or even longer trainings. And so we're really trying to distill down the information into something much more kind of succinct and streamlined. At the risk of possibly covering too much information. And so if things do feel overwhelming or new, we have a lot of support resources available that can help you to digest this information. Having the recording, we hope, will be helpful as well, so you can really get the most out of this training. With that in mind, we'll jump in. So as Tim mentioned, this is going to be the first of a 4-part series, and will be really a prerequisite session for attending the upcoming sessions. So we will assume background understanding of Climate Engine for each of the thematic sessions on riparian and wetland ecosystems, upland ecosystems, and drought and vegetation productivity. We plan to schedule those for September, but have not scheduled them yet, and you'll be seeing announcements through the same channels that you saw this announcement. And we will be providing this recording broadly through our YouTube channel that's public. So for folks who are not registered, we'll be providing that so that they can review these materials, and we'll be able to get the most out of those thematic sessions when we have them. So I know that many of you I think I probably know quite a few people on this call, but others may not know Kristen or I. So we wanted to start with some introductions. Kristen, do you want to go first?
Definitely. Hey everyone, my name is Kristen O'Shea, and I'm a geospatial data scientist on the Climate Engine team at the Desert Research Institute. So I work a lot with the app and the API, writing different tutorials and collaborating with different users to really work on what data sets are most informative for the questions they have and how can we create different workflows to address those questions and making it all easily accessible and repeatable. And I'll pass it back to Eric.
Great, thanks, Kristen. Yeah, and I'm Eric Jensen, also an assistant research scientist at DRI, where I work on Climate Engine. I tend to lead our projects with resource management agencies. So this project with the Bureau of Land Management. We also have work with the National Park Service Water Resources Division as well. And my background, I have worked alongside the BLM for more than 10 years now, dating back to 2015 when I spent 2 years in the AIM program, and then have been much more focused on applications, development and applications of remote sensing for resource management decisions in the years following that. And that brings me to today. So a little bit of background for what we're going to cover in this session. As I said, it will be a session that will be covering quite a bit, but hopefully really tailoring the information to BLM needs and decisions. So Tim provided a really nice introduction. We're going to give some background and overview on what Climate Engine is, what the different tools are that are available within Climate Engine. Then we're going to introduce the Climate Engine reports, which are kind of a nice starting place for reasons that I think we'll all see and discover as we get into that session. And then the rest of the session, to Tim's point before, will really focus on the Climate Engine app and how you can start to really get a lot of the value out of the Climate Engine app for making maps and graphs, and then getting into discussing specific data sets that are relevant to BLM with a focus on drought data sets and remote sensing data sets. And then we'll close with a capstone kind of presentation, I should say capstone demonstration on evaluating riparian restoration projects in Climate Engine. And that will bring us to the end of this session. So starting with some background on Climate Engine, we've been around for more than 10 years now. It started with a Google Earth Engine Faculty Research Award that was granted to Justin Huntington, who's been the PI on this project since its inception, and still guides a lot of the work that happens on Climate Engine today. And in the time since then, it's really grown to be supported by primarily federal agencies. And so NOAA-NIDIS, the National Integrated Drought Information System, and the BLM have been primary supporters of Climate Engine really since its inception. And then we get a lot of other support from federal agencies as well. And I think working with federal agencies is really where we think that the rubber meets the road with applying a lot of this data. Many of you are responsible for making decisions across hundreds of thousands or millions of acres, and remote sensing is really tailored to those types of decisions. And so we really value being able to work with BLM resource managers to support those decision and reporting processes. And so in our work with the BLM, as Tim mentioned, it dates back to about 2015, collaboration led through the Nevada State Office and the Montana State Office. And our agreement now is rolled into headquarters and the NOC, and is coordinated through staff at headquarters and the NOC. We're supported by AIM, Aquatics, Range, and the Nevada State Office as well. And we really try to focus our work on these kind of focus areas. So across the different tasks within our work with BLM, we develop applied science using remote sensing to analyze riparian and wetland systems, and drought impacts are kind of our focus in terms of this work on the applied science side. remote sensing and climate data tooling are really important, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And we really try to support a range of users within the BLM, spanning from, spanning the range of technical capability and familiarity. We, within Climate Engine, integrate a large number of data sets so that you can analyze climate, wildfire, remote sensing data sets in a common platform. We're working much more with BLM to try to integrate these tools, to Tim's point about integrating into ArcGIS, to try to integrate more into BLM processes and software systems. And then training and support is super valuable. And so that's something that we really try to put a lot of effort and attention on. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of the more concrete ways that we work with BLM. And so we, in the last 2 years, have worked with BLM to develop a standardized reporting platform, which we'll be covering here momentarily, which provides drought and site characterization reports in real time. And the drought reports are cited in the National Drought and Water Availability Instructional Memorandum from last year, guiding BLM managers to use the Climate Engine app and the Climate Engine drought reports to inform drought decisions. So that's a really kind of important use case for us. Another is the types of decision documents that BLM has to produce all the time. So this is an example we highlight a lot from a rangeland health assessment, where the Carson City District Office produced a rangeland health assessment for the Pilot Table Mountain grazing allotment, and they used Climate Engine to demonstrate degradation of Upper Summit Spring using satellite indices. So they were able to use satellite-based vegetation productivity indices while accounting for climate and demonstrate that decline had happened at Upper Summit Spring that had not happened for this kind of comparable nearby spring, Cornelius Spring. And so it's these types of decision documents where we really try to support BLM users. One of the things we're trying to do much more of in our work with BLM, especially this next year, is to document these types of applications of Climate Engine. That's super important for demonstrating the outcomes of this project, and is definitely a challenge. Combing through the BLM's e-planning website, there are a lot of documents that all of you produce related to different decisions. So being able to understand the ways that managers are using Climate Engine is important and difficult. So to help with that, we've created an easy, 5-10 minute form where we encourage you to provide that type of information to us so that we can better understand BLM uses. So that's linked here in this document, and I encourage you, as you start to use Climate Engine or continue to use Climate Engine, to tell us about how you're using it. That's super helpful for us and helps us to understand and inform what we're developing for managers. And so that's some background on kind of this agreement, how Climate Engine came about, how it's being used in BLM. And I want to pass it now to Kristen, who's going to do a much deeper dive into what Climate Engine is and the different tools available. So yeah, take it away, Kristen. And
Awesome.
Kristen, just let me know when you want me to advance the slides, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great. Awesome. So now that we know kind of the background of Climate Engine and the partnership with the BLM, I really wanted to start diving in to the tools, what powers them, why they're so powerful. So the first thing I want to say, on the bottom right of the slide, you're going to see that little link that is https:// Climate Engine, and then it's going to have different letters. You're going to see that all throughout our presentation. Those are the links that Tim referred to earlier, and they can take you to the app, to the exact different inputs and map output that we're talking about. So if you wanted to look at this within the app, you just click that link. So Climate Engine is so powerful because it's powered by Google Earth Engine as its backend. And Google Earth Engine has Python and JavaScript APIs, which allow users to access petabytes of gridded data sets, and it's optimized to be able to process them within the cloud to return fast insights, whether they be maps or graphs. And this slide is one of those examples of how Climate Engine has written different functions, as you'll see in that scrolling Python example, to create these outputs. But it really just takes 5 clicks within the app for the user to select different things such as data sets, variables, time periods that they're interested in, and being able to display it quite quickly on the map. Next. So I wanted to start at the top with a really broad overview of what tools are available to you and maybe why you would be interested in using certain tools over other ones. So we have the 3 main Climate Engine tools listed here: the reports, the Climate Engine web application, and then the Climate Engine API. And so as we move through and talk about these different tools a little more specifically, you'll see that you're going to get increasing flexibility as you move to the right. But with that increasing flexibility, you're going to see a decrease in the ease of use. Starting with the reports, all you need to request a report is a polygon of interest, or being able to draw one for our custom polygons, or searching the reports for different BLM specific areas. So these reports are going to have preset data sets and figures. They're going to be formatted and downloadable through a PDF and PNG. And they're really designed to contextualize things like drought or vegetation. But maybe you want to look at a specific time period that's not available to request for a report, or a data set that isn't summarized. Then you would move to the Climate Engine app. It's going to give you some more flexibility for exploring specific time periods, those additional data sets, and there's going to be various mapping calculations available to you. We will be stepping through every single one of those calculations today in some format or another. And then if we move all the way to the API, we see that there's going to be additional functionalities. There are going to be different outputs that maybe we can't do with the app, but we can program those functionalities and make them available through a endpoint. This allows programmatic access to scale and extend your analyses. So you're going to see there's some limitations with some data sets on how big of a geotiff you can download, but you would move beyond that or be able to systematically loop through different areas of interest for analysis. And the API can be integrated into other tools. And so next. And so while we're only focusing on the first two tools today, I wanted a quick example of the Climate Engine API, because some people on this call might be interested in utilizing it. I have links here to learn more about it and also how you could request a key. But one of those examples of additional functionality is being able to summarize things like cover for different land cover types across multiple different areas. So I have an example here where we have the NLCD. We picked a couple different land cover types, and we wanted to look at sagebrush cover over a time series for 5 different plots. And so we were able, all within one script, to request all of this data, process it, and output a figure like you see here. Next. And so, as we said before, we have a lot of different data sets available from Climate Engine. It can almost be a little overwhelming. There's 90 plus, and the list is growing every day. And they're broken down into different categories such as climate and hydrology, remote sensing, forecasts, and hazards. But if we move to the next slide, we can see that that list is going to get a lot smaller today, because there are some very specific data sets that this session will focus on for different decision making and resource management for the BLM. That's going to be looking at GridMet from UC Merced and GridMet Drought, which will cover what those data sets are. Some of the different Landsat and Sentinel data sets for remote sensing that are available, RCMAP and the rangeland analysis platform, which are the fractional data sets available, and then the NTBS data sets are available for fire. Next.
Okay. I think we're transitioning over to talking about Climate Engine reports now. So we wanted to start, as we're starting to dive into the data, we thought the Climate Engine reports are a good place to start. These reports provide a lot of different information summarized in static reports that represent, many of the types of data that are available within the Climate Engine app and API. So as Kristen said, these are going to be, have the highest ease of use, but have the least flexibility. You kind of get, you get what you get out of these reports, and the value of them is that they are very deeply informed by BLM input. So we worked really closely with our working group at BLM, which includes people across many different programs, to inform the types of indicators that are provided in these reports. So you get these kind of tailor-made, succinct reports. We have two different report formats at this time. One is the drought reports. The other is the site characterization reports. The drought reports are produced every 5 days, whereas the site characterization reports are produced every year. We're close to rolling out a new report format called vegetation production, which incorporates real-time productivity data from the rangeland analysis platform and precipitation data from GridMet. And so watch for those in the coming months, and we'll have accompanying support materials, hopefully by the time we do the September sessions. We produce all of these reports, we pre-compute all of them for BLM land units, so all BLM grazing allotments, field offices, district offices, and state offices. And then we also have functionality that allows users to generate these reports for custom areas as well. So I want to walk through each of these reports, starting with the site characterization reports. So as I mentioned, the site characterization report brings together four data sets: the RAP vegetation cover, the RAP vegetation production, GridMet climate data, and GridMet drought indicators. And they're presented in a one-page PDF or PNG report. And so on the left-hand side here, you get maps of vegetation cover, of cover for each of the for the most recent year. So maps of annual forbs and grasses, bare ground, perennial forbs and grasses, shrubs, and trees, representing the percent cover of each of those cover classes. You then get a table at the top of the report providing summaries of the vegetation status for the most recent year, as well as trends in the time series. Are we seeing increases or decreases in annual forbs and grasses, for example? Here we're seeing increases in the annual forbs and grasses in this particular grazing allotment, likely being cheatgrass. Then we have vegetation cover and vegetation production time series figures that provide data from 1986 to 2024 summarized over the land unit. And so you can here quickly see how things varied across this land unit, both through time, but we also can look at how different vegetation cover amounts vary across space as well. So you'll see that we have this for example, on the annual forbs and grasses, this dark red line depicting the average across the allotment. And then the shaded kind of ribbon is showing the variability across the allotment in terms of the 25th and 75th percentile. So you can get a sense for how much variability there is across the landscape. There's probably much more to talk about with these figures, and probably with all of these figures. And for that material, we would refer you to our video tutorial that's linked here at the bottom, that we have quite a bit more detail that we provide. The last panel that we have here is the climate and drought panel, which provides summaries of precipitation and evaporative demand, as well as drought indicators. I think most people are used to thinking about precipitation zones. We provide evaporative demand information as well, because evaporative demand in many locations, especially during the summer months, is what leads to soil moisture being consumed by the atmosphere and being not available for plants. And so being able to account for both whether precipitation is changing through time and whether evaporative demand is changing through time is valuable. And then the drought indicators here are the same ones provided in the drought reports. As I mentioned, we have a detailed tutorial video, a step-by-step article that accompanies that video available on our support site, and you can find those links here. You can also find links to this exact report so you can look at it yourself. For the drought reports, these are again produced every 5 days for all of the same BLM land units. This land unit is in the Las Cruces District Office in New Mexico. You can see that we provide 2 drought indicators with the drought reports, the long-term drought blend, which corresponds to drought conditions over a period of 1 to 5 years preceding the period of interest. And then the short-term drought blends, which are much more recent. They're going to be more like 1 month to 1 year. And several different drought indicators go into these kind of composite blended indicators. We can see that this particular land unit is in a period of exceptional drought in terms of the long-term drought blend. Going across to the time series figures, we can see both magnitude and duration of drought. And so this becomes useful for comparing current drought conditions to previous drought events. And we can see in the long-term drought blend that this has been quite a prolonged and severe drought, that this particular land unit has been largely an exceptional drought for quite a long period of time, and a longer period of time than any other time dating back to 1984, which is the first date that we have for these data sets. And then the short-term drought blend provides similar types of information. Finally, we have a summary table that is based off of information that the U.S. Drought Monitor provides. So this can be a nice summary of how much of this land unit is in these different drought categories. And so how much of the land unit is in those drought categories now, 3 months ago, and 1 year ago. So you can kind of track that through time. Similarly to the site characterization reports, we have a step-by-step article and a detailed tutorial video available. It goes into much more depth on helping you to understand these drought indicators and how to interpret and use them that are available, and we encourage you to visit those resources. I want to do a quick demo of producing a custom site characterization report. So to do that, I'm going to click over to reports.climateengine.org. And here you'll see that we have drop downs for the 2 report types, drought and site characterization. For each of those, you can click this Access BLM Reports link, and that's where you'll find all of the reports for all of the state offices, district offices, field offices, and grazing allotments, and you can get the reports that way. So all of these are pre-computed for all of these areas, and we update them as new data become available. However, often you want to be able to produce reports like this for a custom area. And for that, we have this generate reports option. We have 3 different ways that you can load in your area of interest. I'm going to show you how to upload a shapefile to do that. I have a shapefile of wildfires in Nevada and Utah that I'm going to open up. And when I select that, they're going to be loaded into my map here. You might have different attributes associated with the features in this shapefile. So you can select whichever attribute you want to display here in this drop-down menu. I'm going to select the incident name as mine. And then I'm interested in this fire, the Strawberry Fire, which started in Great Basin National Park and then burned onto BLM land as it burned to the north and east. So when I select the fire, it's going to update the information in this form with the site name. You have to provide an email address because we're going to email you the report. Oops, I'm not BLM. URI.edu. And we'll call this the Strawberry Fire, and I'm going to call it. You can provide whatever information you want in these fields. I'm going to say just post fire vegetation assessment, and I won't type anything in the site description. These are optional. If you have any questions about these different options, you can click the information icon. And then you can select a land ownership type if you want. I am going to select the BLM here. If I was interested in national parks, just national parks land, I could select NPS. And you can get more information about how we apply this land ownership mask here. And then we have, by default, the option selected to remove water, cultivated crops, and developed lands from the report, which I'm going to keep selected. I'm going to click Submit Request. And at this point, it kicks off a process that may take a few minutes. I have already run this for this location. So I'm going to show you just what you get back. You'll get an email that looks like this. Your report is ready for the Strawberry Fire, and you can download that report, put it on your computer wherever you want. I'm going to open it up. And here's your report. It'll indicate whether you had any ownership mask or whether you masked the water cultivated crops and developed lands. And you get a nice summary here showing that after this fire, which I think burned in 2016 or 2017, there was quite a strong vegetation response, a big decline in tree cover, increases initially in bare ground, then in annual forbs and grasses and perennial forbs and grasses. And so you can produce these reports really quickly to help you in different decision processes. So that is our demo for the reports. And I think at this point, we're going to pivot over to the web app, but I think my sense is it's probably a good time to pause for questions. Yeah, Tim, Kristen, I've been not following the chat while I've been talking. Are there questions that are rising to the top that we should try to cover?
I might just reiterate a question that was asked because it was a good one, and others may have that question. And there's an answer in the chat, but the question is the vegetative trend in those reports that's shown up at the top center, is that change per year or is that change over the whole time frame? And the answer is it's change per year. And so to get the estimated change over the entire time period, you simply multiply the trend by that point. And so in this case, I put a little example in there if anybody's interested in that. The other one that came up, and thank you, Kristen, was we were so excited to present all this information that we forgot to link the slides. So they're up there now, and the links are dynamic. Thanks.
Great. Yeah. thanks for covering that. Fantastic. I think with that, if there aren't any other questions at this moment, I would encourage folks, I assume folks can raise their hands. So if you would like to try to ask a question live, maybe raise your hand. And Tim, if you can just watch for hands raised and kind of maybe save those for when we have a good break, that would be helpful as well. Just want to make sure people can get their questions answered.
Sure thing, Eric. Looks like we've got a couple hands up, but before we jump to those, Julian Scott asked a good question, which is if you could just speak a little bit more about the zipped up materials that would accompany the PDF report, if you don't mind taking a minute for that.
Yep, absolutely. So this is my folder, Strawberry Fire. So in there, you're going to find a README file with information about the data that's contained here. In the data folder, you actually get the GridMet time series. So this is going to be the precipitation and evaporative demand information, GridMet drought time series, so the drought information, and all of the RAP data in a CSV that you can analyze or visualize any other way that you might want. So if there's some sort of visual that we didn't provide in the report, or some sort of statistic that you want to pull out that we don't provide in the report, we try to make that available to you. We also package up the components to the reports in this folder. So if you are interested in, let's say the RAP production plot, you can find that here as well to pull in somewhere else. So yeah, thanks for flagging that, Julian.
Thank you, Eric. And we do have two other questions. First, we'll go to Julie Turner. Julie, if you'd like to come on and ask your question.
Sure, thank you. So I was just curious if there was some background guidance on the actual types of remote sensing, and maybe an example somewhere or a how-to on, say, which is the best remote sensing to use for a specific analysis. Like, say, if you wanted to look at years of higher or lower evapotranspiration rates versus drought or precipitation or something like that.
Yeah, we're probably admittedly putting the cart before the horse a little bit by presenting these reports first. They're kind of setting the stage, and then we'll dive much more deeply into some of the data sets available in Climate Engine coming up in the next half hour or so.
Great.
So I would say hold that question. But that said, there will almost definitely be things that we won't cover. And I think this is just in general for folks on this call. I think that, there are a lot of types of questions that we think that Climate Engine can be used to address. And so we will not be covering all of those questions. There's just no way to cover all those types of questions in one training. So we would encourage you to follow up with us and Tim, I think, to try to address any other questions that we don't cover.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Next, we'll go to, I hope I'm saying your name right, Elin Pierce?
It's actually Aylin, but it's not intuitive. Thank you for asking. I just have a quick question. Well, I'm always concerned about standard error, standard deviation. Do you have that included in your report somewhere, that potentially we could include that in the results of whatever we present using Climate Engine?
Yeah, you can. So there are ways that you can pull standard deviation over, especially using our API, pull standard deviation time series, for example. If you're interested specifically in error metrics, those are largely provided by data producers. So we would refer to the scientific publications, and we try to provide that information through our support site. But yeah, there are quite a few different statistics that you can pull in through using the Climate Engine API. And we probably, actually Kristen's example highlighted some of that earlier in the deck. So if you have other questions about that, please let us know and follow up with us.
Oh, no, this is great. That answered my question perfectly. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
And I might take a very quick opportunity to just add that there is a fractional vegetation cover working group that's made up of a bunch of different folks from different agencies. Myself and Eric are some of the people on that. And there's been several papers that have come out lately, specifically looking at some of the fractional veg cover types. It's a very dynamic environment, but I'd be happy to follow up with you on some more information for that as well. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, yeah, thank you everyone for the discussion. It's helpful to get these questions and to be able to clarify these things. To keep us moving along on our tight agenda, I'm going to pass things off to Kristen to cover the Climate Engine web application. And then maybe we'll pause at the end of this for more questions again.
Awesome. Eric, I think this would be a good time to switch screens because I have
Good
a good
call.
run of it.
Yes. I'm going to stop sharing and you can take over.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to start diving into that next tool we talked about. You're going to gain some flexibility here, but there's a lot that goes along with it. I'm going to try to highlight a lot of things, but again, please do not feel overwhelmed. On our support site, we have some video tutorials where Eric walks you step by step. So anything that you miss can always be revisited. So here on this slide, I wanted to highlight some of the different types of analysis that would be relevant to the BLM that you could do in Climate Engine. I'm not going to be able to cover all of these with our time today, but there are links taking you to those exact demonstrations. On the top left, we're talking about trends in cover, looking at trends in tree cover in an area that has seen fire. And you can see we actually have fire perimeters that you can overlay on these areas and see how change is happening over time. The vegetation time series on the bottom right is actually for that fire. So not just seeing the trend, but actually being able to see over time when it was impacted, how badly, all of those things. Moving to the top right, looking at things like production anomalies using the 16-day production data. So being able to tell, is that total production, how much is it above or below average over a certain time? And then lastly, on the bottom left, you might be interested in digging into different drought values to understand if a certain area is under drought, how long has it been? Is it more of a vegetative drought or more of a drought, a longer term that's impacting water on the surface? But for now, I wanted to do a demo for all of those people that are new to the web application. So if you go to app.climateengine.org, it's going to take you, and we have that link at the top of this slide too. So you can click on that and take you to the app. As long as you're signed up with your free account, you should be able to open it. And so it's going to take you here where we have different guided and video tours if you want more in-depth walkthrough. So on the left-hand panel of the app is where you're going to make all of the decisions about the data that you want to summarize and visualize. So through the app, you can either make a map or you can make a chart. And here is where we're going to say, I want to use this data set. I want to process it this way over this time period. And on the right is where you're going to see that visualized and where you're going to be able to do things like download, get links, change colors, overlay fire perimeters, and whatnot. So I want to show, we're going to use the same data set for all of my examples during this section because I want to show how even with one data set, there are so many different ways that we can dig in and summarize the data. And then in the next section, we'll dig into more BLM specific applications. So we're going to start on the Make Map tab of the app, and we're going to start with our variable of interest. Again, as I said earlier, we have 4 different categories. but we're going to stay within climate and hydrology. We have a nice little search datasets link here that will bring up a Google Doc that takes you step by step. Maybe you want precipitation and you're not sure which datasets are available to you. It'll tell you how to search for datasets with precipitation, with snow, all of the different variables that you might be interested in. Next, it's going to be pre-populated with GridMet, which we're going to use for our examples, but here's where you start seeing the real breadth of the data sets available in Climate Engine. And so we have these broken into global and North America CONUS for this type. And so we'll stick with GridMet. If you're not sure about a data set, you can always click this nice little question mark, and it will take you to our support site where we talk about the description of the data, where it was, the website where we accessed it, where it's hosted. So we ingest a lot of data sets, but some are already available on Earth Engine, and we want to make it available through Climate Engine. So you can get the details there, things like spatial resolution or time span, the different variables that are available for that data set, the terms of use, references, and then we try to add additional notes that could be helpful for different people for variables. So if it's a remote sensing, we might tell you any processing that we do on our end, or maybe how we define a day, as you can see here with GridMet. And so once you select a data set, it's going to next populate the variables that are available to you. So GridMet has a lot of climate variables. We tried to break them down into different sections that makes it easier to navigate through. So things like temperature, precipitation, evapotranspiration, humidity, wind, radiation, and so on. And then wherever possible, so we can see drought here, we try to calculate any of the drought variables that might be of interest. And we also have some fire variables through this data set. Again, we're just going to stick with precipitation. We're focusing a little less on the data set for this part and more on the functionality, but then we'll dig in and build upon these examples. So once we're done with that variable section, we can move to the next one, where we tell the app, how do we want to process this data? So for precipitation, the only option is total, because we want to take a total over the day range. This is the temporal statistic, but you can imagine another data set, maybe you want to take the average or mean. So we have that pre-populated. If you have any questions about what any of these mean, we have these nice little question marks that try to help. And then we have multiple calculations that are available. So you can return just the values, so precipitation for a certain time period. But we can also do things like anomalies and trends. Is this precipitation a lot more than expected during this time, given past conditions, or what percentile does it fall within? Is it within the 98th percentile? And so we have all of these options. We're just going to leave it at values for now. Next, we're going to move to a custom date range. We're going to pick the last 60 days of data. You can have a custom date range where you type in the time period you're interested in. We try to pick different time periods that you can choose from that are informative, such as northern water year, growing seasons, year to date, period of record. We'll just look at the last 60 days of data. It will automatically update the start and end date, and then we just click Get Map Layer. So it's sending all of these instructions to Climate Engine. It's running those functions like I showed before, and it's going to return a map to this map panel. And so what you can do with the map panel is you can zoom in and out, turn on and off the transparency. We can get a value for a certain area by clicking this little Get Value, move this dot and click Show Value. It's going to send another request, and we can see 550 millimeters at that area. I can zoom back out here. We can come up to this little panel here and make some adjustments. So we try to choose informative color palettes automatically, but we have a lot of different divergent and sequential map patterns that are available to you from things like Color Brewer. And then we have some custom maps for things like the USDM, OpenET, and whatnot. You can pick if you want it to be continuous or discrete, and the number of colors that you want included. And then we also can adjust things like the min-max value. If we were to do that, we would just click Update Map Layer. So again, we try to give a min-max. That's great for visualization, but to cover the wide variety of situations you can ask Climate Engine for, sometimes you're going to need to update that to better be able to visualize your data. The second dropdown, we can see that we can change the base map to different ones that you may be interested in. So we've gotten requests for a wide variety of backgrounds, but you can pick the one that's best for the investigation that you're looking at. Next is this layers dropdown. So these are going to be vector layers that can be overlaid. So we could do something like US states and then click, and it will provide any of the values that are attributes within that. So for the fire, it might tell you when it started. For different HUC codes, it can give the HUC name and code. And so we can change those. We already have some grazing allotments preloaded. And we're always open to hearing feedback about what would be most useful. These US Forest Service grazing allotments were actually feedback from a previous workshop. So you could reach out and let us know if there's ones that would be really useful for you. Next is a masking option. So you could say, I only want to see precipitation greater than 300, and it would mask out all of those other layers. I'm giving you the full breadth. But you might not use all of these within your use of Climate Engine, especially getting started. And then lastly, how to download the data. So you can either download a GeoTIFF, you can pick a rectangular region, you can move it around, make it bigger or smaller, and then download the map layer. There are limitations. So at a 30-meter scale, you're not going to be able to export a really large area. But if you're interested in pulling remote sensing data at a larger scale, that would be something you would want to do with the API. And then if you just need a map PDF image, you could click download map image. The last thing I wanted to highlight, just to keep us moving on, is this link. So you saw all of the links that we have on our slide decks. This is how you would get one of those. And I feel like this is really useful. If you have a presentation, you want to be able to bring Climate Engine back up exactly where you left off. You could copy that and put it in your speaker notes, or you could send it in an email if you wanted someone to check out a certain trend that you saw and whatnot. So I'm going to come back here. So maybe we don't want to just know about precipitation in the last 60 days, but we want to know what is that difference from average conditions. If we update the calculation, we still see our time period here, but we can update the year range. So we can say, how does the last 60 days in 2025 compared to 1994 to 2024. And we can click Get Map Layer. And so sometimes it'll take a second to load in the map. By the way, I have the links for all of these on this slide deck here. There we go. It's going to start loading in. And so we can see in some of these areas, it's probably up to 200 more millimeters, then average over that time period. We could get value to explore more, but I want to highlight a few more of the calculations that we can do. If we come down to slope of trend and run that, it's going to run a sun slope calculation on each pixel. Here's one of those where you can see it's pretty saturated. So we're going to want to come here and update. Sometimes it can take a few tries. It's still pretty saturated. But you would keep just adapting to see that. Also, it's a short time period that we're showing this over, but I also wanted to highlight the option to pick different confidence intervals. And as we update those, it's going to mask out anywhere that doesn't meet that confidence interval. So a lot in this case, but we have a few regions where those are some strong, significant trends. And then lastly, for the mapping, we saw how it's trending. We saw how it differs from average, but maybe we want to know where that falls in its rank over time for that time period. And so then we can pick percentile and distribution of past observations as our option. While that's loading, I'll take a quick check in the chat. Maybe I'll try. Also, if it gets a little slow, something that you can do, we have this nice little reset button. So I changed a lot of things pretty fast. So I'm just going to reset. Head back here. We have the same things, just going to update that last 60 days back to that percentile and distribution of past observations. And see if that speeds it up. And so for every pixel, it's going into that last 30 years, finding the 68-day precipitation totals for each of those years. And then it's finding where 2025 is within that ranking. So we can see some of these areas down in Mississippi and Alabama are in the 98th percentile, and looks up here in Washington and Portland, one of the lowest percentiles there. So not a lot of rain compared to that history. To keep things moving, I'm going to hop over and make some graphs. So we have different calculations. I'll be covering all of these in different demos, but for this one, we're going to start with a native time series. So this is for every single point of available data. It's going to provide a value back. We have one or two variable analysis. We're going to stick with one. We're just going to add a point so we can drag and drop, but you can draw polygons. As we'll show, you can upload shape files. You could pick a fire perimeter. And so all of that's kind of the new stuff with graphing, but then the variable looks very similar. We're going to pick our type, data set, and variable, and then our time period. And so for a point, it'll show us, and we can kind of hover over so we can see the value by day as we hover over here. And so that's for the last. We can download this as a PNG, a PDF, a CSV. We can see all of the data here for that time period. And then maybe we want to look at not just the last 60 days, but again, that time period. We can update this to summary time series. And And so it's going to be that April 25th to June 23rd, but we're going to pick from 1995 to 2025 and get that time series. So it's going to automatically split as blue is greater than average precipitation for that time period, red as lower than average for that time period. You can update things like if we wanted a line chart instead of a bar chart, we can update the bounds to be 400. We could change our threshold for that mean value. And then we could add some statistics to it. And again, download. But yeah, so that is kind of the overview of the Climate Engine app and what you can do. So my next transition is to talking a little bit about these data sets more in depth and doing some app examples, working with them. But I wanted to pause and see if there were any questions to answer. On the app, maybe a quick couple.
I think we've got the chat covered, but I see Aylin's got her hand up.
Awesome.
Questions. One is, I noticed on the map there was some on the color range for the different types of data. Yes, in the middle is a blank. Do you have, so my question is, what do you do with areas where there's no data? Is it gray or what?
It will be grayed out.
Okay. So in those areas in Southern California, are those with no data, or is that just somewhere between 30 and 70?
It should be somewhere between 30 and 70. We can head back to the map tab. It's not showing me my get value, but normally it should have its get value here, so we could dig into it, and you could pull the little over and ask it for the value for that area. Let me see if I request it.
Sources of new data. Does Climate Engine incorporate upcoming new data that's available from monitoring stations?
So all of the data that we currently have is gridded data sets. So when a new version of the gridded data set, such as RCMAP, comes out, we worked with Sam Roy to update that and make it available. But we don't currently have monitoring stations within the app. We are working with NOAA to put different weather stations and making those available and looking for trends, but that's very much under development currently.
Yeah. And just an aside, does Climate Engine include any kind of data that might include season shift, phenology data?
I'm going to defer that one to Eric.
Yeah, I think that's something we're trying to do with the production reports is to try to represent that phenological information, both in terms of kind of interannual variability and then our shifts happening. So, I mean, the short answer is that I think by pulling the time series information from Climate Engine, say from the RAP production data or Landsat data, which we'll cover here in a few minutes, that you can start to look at some of those phenological questions.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, and you can see here that 46%, so it does fall right within that value. So that's a way you can always go and reinvestigate. I'm going to keep moving just so we can cover all of our examples, and we can always circle back or ask your question in the chat. So we have some BLM-relevant data sets.
Kristen, just briefly, Aylin, I think we're getting some feedback from your microphone. If you can just mute.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, thanks, Eric. So BLM-relevant data sets, we wanted to give you just a deeper dive into some of the ones that are available for answering different questions around drought and vegetation. And so the first one is the U.S. Drought Monitor, which you may all be interested in or familiar with. So this is released every Thursday, and it shows different parts of the U.S. that are in drought. So it's originally a vector-based data set that we have available as a raster. It blends different physical indicators with expert insight, condition observations, reports of drought impacts. So it's not just based on a statistical analysis of either, how much precipitation or how much water is leaving the system, but they look at things like lake levels, impacts to stream gauges, things like that. So it depicts both short and long-term drought, which can sometimes be complex to understand kind of what's going on and read it. And it can be limited by coarseness and black box calculations. So no one can actually recreate the US Drought Monitor, but it does have impactful insights into how drought is changing within the US. The second data set we wanted to highlight was from UC Merced. This is GridMet. It blends high resolution spatial data from PRISM with high temporal resolution data from NLDAS that allows them to offer a wide variety of variables. As you saw in my example, a really long list. It's available as a 4-kilometer spatial resolution, and it's calculated at a daily temporal resolution. And it's validated using an extensive network of different weather stations. It has a wide variety of variables. Again, that temperature, humidity, wind, all the way through fire. And I just have an example of precipitation here. And so what you can do and what people have done is they've created drought indices and indicators using things like GridMet to create GridMet drought. And so these drought indices and indicators, basically what they do is they look at either water coming into the system, so that's precipitation, or moisture leaving for evapotranspiration. And so you can see here, you're going to hear things like SPI, SPEI, eddy. That's basically just looking at which part of that equation, either coming into the system or leaving, is being considered for that drought index. So something like the standardized precipitation index is only going to consider water coming into the system, where eddy is going to only consider it leaving. And then we have things like SPEI that do both. And so unlike a normal anomaly or a simple difference from average, kind of like we saw in my previous example, standardized anomalies are going to fit that distribution, that data to a distribution, and then look what categories it falls within. So say we have the last 30 days of precipitation, and we look at so that's a 30-day SPI over a certain climatology. It's going to pull that value for precipitation for every year over the 30 years. It's going to fit that data to this distribution, and then it's going to let you know where it falls on that distribution, the one that you're looking at. And so things like eddy, if it falls within the orange, it's going to be severe drought. Even further away on the distribution, it gets to extreme and then to exceptional. And I just kind of want to give that background because there are a lot of standard indices that avail ability to calculate your own or tap into GridMet Drought through Climate Engine to understand not just that 30 days, but maybe 60, 90, maybe a 5-year amount of time. So drought indices derived from GridMet are calculated every 5 days, so they're a pentad. The standardization done for GridMet Drought is using a non-parametric standardized probability, so that distribution, but we have different distributions available. So all the data are standardized over a common time period of 1981 to 2016, and it includes those indices that I just mentioned that are considered both precipitation or evaporation into the system at multiple day ranges all the way up to 5-year timescales. We also have the Palmer Drought Severity Index and the Palmer Z Index, which are all also other popular drought indices. And we calculate things like the long and short-term drought blends. As you can see here in the picture, short-term on the top, long-term on the bottom, on the fly from the GridMet drought data. And so those blends are really useful and impactful because they let you look at different timescales. The short term is going to be more indicative of things like vegetative drought. It's going to be using the 14 days, 90-day inputs, where the long term is going to be more indicative of less water within the systems on the surface. It's going to include those longer time periods in its calculation. So I'm going to do a quick demo before I hand it back over to Eric for the remote sensing. But here I wanted to show that sometimes the story of the data sets don't always align. And it's really nice to have Climate Engine because it allows you to dig further into what you're seeing on the surface. So this example is one that came to us before my time at Climate Engine. But there was an area in Lovelock, Nevada, where it was shown at the U.S. Drought Monitor as exceptional drought. And they weren't writing any permits for grazing. However, the ranchers are looking around and saying, that doesn't align with what we're seeing. We're seeing these high grasses. And so when we look at the long-term drought blend and also the short-term drought blend, it actually shows that it's not even a drought, it's in moderate wetness for the same area. So this is going to be a little bit of a higher resolution drought look. And then on the right, we can actually see if we pull NDVI and do a difference from average, it aligns with that long-term drought blend of they had rains earlier in the season, and we're seeing that higher than average NDVI that is available. So that's one of the questions, and the ability to have multiple data sets to dig into it. I'm going to quickly go through. I'm just going to reset and show you how to derive those different pieces, and then hand this over to Eric. Okay, so we're again on our making map. We're just going to go down one to GridMet Drought. It's going to tell you it's 4 kilometers in pentad right in its drop-down name set. Oh, actually, I wanted to do USDM first. So this is a 2.5 kilometer weekly data set. Only one variable available. That's the drought classification. We're just going to get the values for now. And we're going to use a custom date range. And so if we're looking at a single value, we're going to give it the same date for both the start and end date. If I gave it multiple values, it would actually take the mean between the two images before adding it to the map. So if we zoom in here to Lovelock, we can see that it's an exceptional drought. We have this little question mark, allows you to see the dark brown color was showing during that time. However, if we update and go back up to the GridMet Drought and go to our long-term drought blend, there's going to be no statistic because the drought blends are going to be calculated over a specific time period. So we're doing the standardized index, and we have this time period, and we click Get Map Layer. Now, this is a really great example. You can see that it's set to the closest valid date. Since it's a pentad and it's available every 5 days, it was available on August 23rd, and it would be available again on August 28th. So it automatically sets to that closest value. And so if we wanted it after the 25th, then we would update it from there. But we can see the same area is within that abnormal and moderate wet even a little bit of severe wet there at that time period. And so something we haven't done yet is we can switch from climate and hydrology to remote sensing. It's going to keep our map the same, but we have our data sets now here that Eric's going to go more into the options, but we can pick NDVI. We can pick difference from average conditions. And I'll do the exact dates that we have here, 1991 to 2020. Oh, I didn't update this. I knew something. So for remote sensing, we're going to pick between this time period. So the first of the month. And so this is going to be higher resolution than that data that we're just looking at. So it could take a little bit longer, but we can see here and we could adjust our trends. So between 0.1 to 0.2, greater NDVI from average. And that is a great segue into the remote sensing data with Eric. And any questions, throw them in the chat and I'll answer.
I was just thinking that was a great segue, almost like you planned it that way. So that is great. I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can talk about remote sensing. And one of the things that I was just noticing and continuously blows me away that I think is really cool that Kristen was showing is that if you saw the dates that are available for the satellite data set, the Landsat data, it was up through June 24th. So it's available with only a 2-day lag. So if there's an image available for 2 days ago, you can create the same type of map that Kristen did to look at NDVI anomalies for any area you're interested in. And I just think that it's an amazing world we live in. So with that, I want to start by talking about how we kind of break out remote sensing data sets with Climate Engine. Kind of as Kristen pointed out there, having the climate data sets alongside the remote sensing data sets and being able to look at climate and drought drivers, as well as the vegetation response that's picked up by remote sensing indicators, having that in a single platform like Climate Engine is really exciting, and you can do a lot of different types of analysis with that. So I want to talk about the remote sensing data sets we have available. We break out our data sets into what we would call remote sensing indices and derived products. So the remote sensing indices, the satellite programs that I'll talk about a little bit more soon, Landsat, Sentinel-2, they're collecting images of the Earth's surface. These images are reflectance that's being either reflected or I'm sorry, energy that's either being reflected or emitted from the Earth's surface. From those, from that reflectance information, we can calculate all kinds of different indices related to productivity, wetness, fire severity. There are a number of these different indices. One of the most recognized and widely used is the normalized difference vegetation index, which is which maps vegetation productivity. And so we'll talk about that here momentarily. The other types of data sets that we have in Climate Engine are derived products. So these are products based on models. Some of them are machine learning or AI models. Others are kind of physically based surface energy balance models. But these are providing estimates of variables that we're much more likely to learn about in ecology or other environmental science classes. They're environmental variables, such as vegetation cover percent, above ground vegetation production in pounds per acre, evapotranspiration, and we'll talk about those data sets like the Rangeland Analysis Platform, RCMAP, and OpenET. But I want to start with talking just a little bit about remote sensing indices, and specifically talking about the normalized difference vegetation index, which is an index that we use a lot, especially in riparian areas, and will come up in a demo that Kristen's going to give towards the end of this session. So healthy vegetation reflects near-infrared energy and absorbs red energy. It's absorbing red energy for photosynthesis. And so what NDVI is doing is essentially exploiting that relationship between the near-infrared and the red energy that's reflected and representing that as a normalized ratio, such that values of close to zero or below zero are either non-vegetation or not unproductive, and vegetation's above 0.4, 0.5, depending on what type of ecosystem you're in, are going to be much more productive vegetation types. And so a couple examples here. NDVI is high when vegetation is reflecting a lot of near-infrared energy and absorbing a lot of red, and then the converse is true. And you can calculate these out for yourself on paper using this simple formula if you'd like to do that. That's helpful for developing some intuition about NDVI. And so with satellite data that's collecting continuous images of near-infrared and red reflectance, we can create maps of NDVI. And that's how we end up with a map of NDVI here, where we can see that the center pivot agriculture and kind of the toe slopes of this mountain range are more productive than many of the kind of surrounding areas. Now, especially in uplands, in the Intermountain West, we need to be careful with how we're thinking about NDVI. Many people will say, well, NDVI is a measure of ecosystem health. And in many cases, that can be true. Cheatgrass can have a very high NDVI value in early spring, or anytime following a pulse of moisture. And I don't think that we would describe a cheatgrass monoculture as a healthy ecosystem. And so we tend to use NDVI much more in riparian and wetland systems where productivity is much more related to ecosystem function and habitat value than in upland ecosystems. Cool. I see some conversation happening in the chat, and that all seems productive. Yeah, we have many other vegetation indices available in Climate Engine as well, which I think we'll see in a future demo. So two of the data sets that are going to be most useful, two of the satellite data sets that are going to be most useful for BLM are Landsat and Sentinel-2. So I want to talk a little bit about each of those. Landsat is the longest continuous space-based record of the Earth's surface. Harmonized data go back to 1984, and as we saw in the previous demo, are current up through in public archives up through a couple of days ago, so it's updated in real time. Each satellite is collecting data every 16 days. So right now there are two Landsat satellites. So we're getting data back every 8 days when there are two satellites that are active. And the data are provided at a 30-meter spatial resolution. So I like to show a comparison of Google Maps to Landsat imagery for the same location. And you can see that you just can't resolve individual trees. You can't see individual, small features in the Landsat data. Of course, what we get with Landsat that we don't get with Google Maps is a 40-year consistent record of the Earth's surface. So whether you're using high-resolution imagery or whether you want to use satellite imagery to address a certain question, totally depends on your question. But Landsat is going to be really valuable for analyzing change through long periods of time. And then Sentinel-2 is a more modern satellite mission by the European Space Agency. Data collection started, I think, as early as 2015, but started to ramp up towards 2017, and then more so in the years following that. So Sentinel-2 data are a higher spatial resolution. They're 10 meters. So you get quite a bit more detail. If I toggle between the Landsat slide and the Sentinel-2 slide, you'll see here you're starting to resolve individual trees or tree clusters at that resolution. The data from Sentinel-2 come every 10 days for each satellite, so it's every 5 days, I think, right? Actually, there might be 3 satellites, so it might be every 3 days right now. So you get much more frequent high-resolution observations. What you sacrifice with Sentinel-2 is that it's only available for recent years compared to Landsat is available for a longer period. So again, it really depends on your question, which data set you might use. Kristen will show a few examples of creating NDVI maps in her demo at the end of this session, but I just wanted to show a few of the things that you can do in Climate Engine. We can create maps of NDVI over just a period of time. So this is last summer over a portion of northeastern California. We can also create anomaly maps. So how does this year's NDVI compare to a longer term period, just like Kristen did with precipitation previously? We can do the same type of trend maps that Kristen demonstrated with the precipitation data as well, and see some interesting patterns here where uplands are showing a more positive trend in productivity, and some of these lower elevation shrublands are trending more negative, and some interesting things happening, it looks like, in this meadow here as well that may be related to some of the agricultural activity. And then the same way Kristen showed pulling time series, we can pull time series statistics for NDVI as well. And so these again are all linked, provided with links, and Kristen will show a pretty similar example in her demo at the end of this session. The second type of product that we have in remote sensing product we have in Climate Engine is the derived products. So I want to talk about just a couple of data sets. The first is the rangeland analysis platform, which actually has 2 data sets, vegetation cover and rangeland production. And so the vegetation cover data set actually has 6 cover types. So perennial forbs and grasses, annual forbs and grasses, shrubs, trees, bare ground, and litter, which is not represented in this infographic. It's available yearly and represents percent cover. And we saw this in the site characterization reports earlier. The second data set is rangeland production, which is provided as estimates of above ground production for perennial herbaceous plants and annual herbaceous plants. And it's available both yearly and as a continuous 16-day data set. We'll talk much more about the 16-day data set in the vegetation and productivity thematic session. And these maps are provided as estimates in terms of pounds per acre. The data set's available for all of the contiguous US and is produced at a 30-meter spatial resolution, similar to Landsat, and you can find more information about this data set on our support site. The second data set I want to talk about is RCMAP, which is produced by the USGS and is going to be similar to the RAP cover data set. So here there are 10 vegetation/cover classes. The big change here, they break out the classes a little bit differently. You'll see as you dive into these data sets. The big difference here is the inclusion of a sagebrush layer, which you can see mapped here in this example on the right. Otherwise, this data set is quite similar. Has a similar time period from 1985 to 2024. also available as a 30-meter spatial resolution, and is available now for all of the Western US and Great Plains. I think they mask agriculture and developed lands from this data set, but otherwise it's continuous across those areas. And they may mask higher elevation primary forests as well in some areas. So we can use RAP and RCMAP side by side in Climate Engine, and that's what I want to show next. So I'm going to use an example from the Bruna Owyhee sage-grouse habitat project, which has been a very large management project in southwestern Idaho to reduce the cover of juniper trees that have been expanding in recent decades. And this is to improve habitat for sage-grouse. And one of the outcomes that they've seen in many areas is an increase in perennial forbin grass cover. And so I'm going to show an example here of how we can map production anomalies using the RAP and then compare perennial forbin grass cover estimates from RAP and RCMAP. So to do that, I'm going to go over into the Climate Engine web app. And we're going to be in the remote sensing section. I'm going to load in my area of interest because, and this came up in the chat, this will zoom us in on our location that we're interested in. So to load in an area of interest, you'll click the Make Graph tab because that's where we handle all of our area of interest information. And I'm going to load a custom shapefile. And I have this Bosch treatment shapefile that I'm going to load in. And that's going to center me on the location we're interested in. I'm now going to go over to the Make Map tab. And I'm going to select RAP production and select the yearly product. Again, there are a number of data sets available in Climate Engine, so you kind of just need to know where to look for the data set you want to use. I'm specifically interested in the response of perennial herbaceous vegetation. And I'm first going to just create a map of the average conditions for over a 3-year period. Production can vary a lot over a multi-year period. So this will give us a good sense of vegetation production over this area. Our color ramp isn't quite right for this area using the default, so I'm going to update that here. And now we start to see a nice map. If I want to see my overlay of my area of interest, I can do that, and we can see this area is quite a bit more productive than the surrounding area. Now we can go a bit deeper by doing a % of average condition anomaly map. So here I'm going to select just the most recent year as our target period and relate that back to the pre-juniper removal period. I believe this treatment was from 2013. So I'm going to select 1986 to 2012. And here we're going to get a map of the % of average production showing that over this treatment, the production is much higher than it was prior to the junipers being removed. If I wanted to download this layer, would be a pretty useful thing to download and bring into a GIS. I can select my area of interest using this rectangular region and export the same way that Kristen showed before. So the last thing that I want to show here is how we can pull RAP and RCMAP data to compare the post-treatment response here. So I'm going to here switch over to using RAP cover because both RAP and RCMAP have a perennial forbin grass layer that we can compare. RCMAP doesn't have production, so we'll use the cover data set so that we can easily compare things. And so I now have my first variable set. I'm going to return RAP cover for perennial forbs and grasses from 1986 through 2024. And I actually want to add another variable to my figure, which is going to be the RCMAP perennial forb and grass cover. So I will go to RCMAP, select perennial herbaceous cover, And now I can click run to get these two time series. And I get time series data back pretty quickly for that area. You'll notice that the y-axis is going to be slightly shifted here. It's determined independently anytime you make a call. So if you want, like in this case, I want the y-axis to be directly comparable. I can change those values here for this figure. And I now have a nice figure showing that RAP and RCMAP have pretty strong correspondence showing perennial foreland grass cover increasing over this area for our period of interest following restoration. If I wanted to download this, I can do that the same way that Kristen was describing before. And so that's the demo that I have for the remote sensing section. I know we're running, I think, about 5 minutes over time right now. I haven't been following the chat too closely, but I wonder if we do want to hold questions. I know we're going to need some time to get through this this demo. So yeah, how
Eric,
are things going in the chat?
I think we're good on questions. I think we're getting them answered in the chat. Yeah, we're about 6 or 7 minutes behind. And so I know we had 5 minutes at the end for some closing remarks. Kristen, I'll let you decide if you need to adjust or how we want to play that.
Yeah, definitely. I can hop in and do this demonstration, but I'll do it a little quicker, but highlight that we have an article and video that goes through it a little slower, and then we can wrap up with more questions at the end. So I'll try to end a little bit earlier from that demo.
Sounds great.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, so this is the last demo we have for you guys. We really packed all the examples in, but I think it's really great stuff. And so the last one we really wanted to highlight because we've shown you pieces of starting to dig into these data sets and the insights that you can gather from them. But this is a complete workflow towards a specific outcome. For this example, we're evaluating a riparian restoration project. So as you can see in the slide here, we have every single step that I'm going to go through available as those links that you can go click on, a video tutorial, and then the step-by-step article. So when you click on that on our support site,
Kristen,
it's
you're
going to
not sharing.
Oh, thank you. I just hopped right in. So I just clicked on this step-by-step article. I just want to highlight that we have both a video, but then more description for all of the outputs that you're going to see me demonstrate in this quick demo. So you can learn more there. So I'm going to hop over to Climate Engine. I've already centered it on our area of interest for this workflow. It's going to be Susie Creek. And really what we're interested in is understanding it underwent restoration. What were the outcomes? How did it change vegetation in this area and the productivity of it? So the first thing we're going to do in this workflow is create an NDVI map, as Eric alluded to. When we switch to remote sensing, it's automatically going to have NDVI as a default for Landsat. But if you want to do this analysis with another data set, you could update it there. We're going to keep the mean statistic over the time period, and we're just going to choose the values. And we're going to look at the last June through August of this time period and add that to the map. And so we're seeing in the Susie Creek region that there is productivity along that riparian area. We're seeing the last June through August. Since it's not complete yet for 2025, it's going to pull for 2024. But we want to dig in maybe to more, what is the trend of this area over time? So we're going to pick the slope of trend, go to 95th confidence, and then we're going to update this, say, for the last 30 years. And so now it's going to take all of those raster layers over that time period, and it's going to calculate the trend for each pixel. And so we can see along this area where my mouse is, we know that it underwent restoration and we're seeing a positive NDVI trend. That's going to be something that's good, but we really don't know when during that time period is this trend changing? Is it because of the restoration? And so that's when in the workflow we could dig further into what we're seeing here and try to explain it maybe with a time series, looking at how it's changing over each year. So we can have our map here and then switch to our graphing tab. We can say that we want a summary time series because we're looking at that June through August time period. We don't want to pick every point of data within that, but overall through that time period, what it's showing. We'll stick at one variable analysis. And I'm just gonna draw a polygon here to the area I'm interested in that we want to explore further. It's going to update all of our information from the mapping tab to the variable. And then we have our time range. Looks good. I'm just going to update our year range to those 30 years and click Get Time Series. Okay, so we see most of all of the above average NDVI for those summer months came after 2008 to 2010 and most of the before. So you could be wondering maybe what one of the drivers, maybe it's precipitation in this area. That's why we're going to go to this two variable analysis. It's going to keep the first variable the same, but we can add a second variable. We're going to look at grid met precipitation, and we're going to use northern water year as our time period. Make sure our year range matches. And we can see if precipitation's driving the trends that we see here. And so it's going to add, again, you could update the different bar charts. We have two variables here. So if you wanted one to be the line and one to be the chart, you could change those. But we can see here, the blue is where it's going to be above average precipitation for that water year. Red's going to be below average. And we see areas where productivity wasn't higher, even when it was above average precipitation. And then also areas where it was below average precipitation, but you had higher productivity than over that time period. So we can say and conclude that precipitation is not driving those NDVI trends that we see here, but we still haven't been able to really nail down, is it the restoration that is driving this? So something we can look into if we come back up to our calculations is our two variable scatter plot. I'm going to update these and swap them because I know that it's just going to be a little easier to interpret if precipitation's the same or the first variable. So we have, it's going to be the same data sets and variables we've been doing. I'm just going to swap them. VI. And we'll do our same time period for both. Say get time period. So this allows us to create a scatter plot where precipitation is going to be on one axis and NDVI is going to be on another. Again, we can hover and find which year and values each one represents. But we might want to take it one step further, and we could break out two different year ranges. So if we were to go up to 2010, when we knew some restoration took place, and split that into 2011 to 2024 for both of these. Yep. we can split up these different data points and better understand what are the trends we're seeing between the two time periods. And we can actually see here that a lot of, no matter what the level of precipitation, we're seeing higher productivity within that riparian vegetation post-restoration than we see before. And then we can add some regression lines and confidence bands to further understand that not only is it higher, it's outside of the different prediction bands. So the NDVI is higher across all of those levels. And with that, that is the end of our demo. So that is a workflow and an example of how you would use a combination of maps and charts to investigate a question, an environmental question. And so before I open it for questions, I just wanted to wrap up. So we have a lot of resources. We've been throwing them in the chat, but I encourage you to explore them on your own. I have them linked here. I really want to highlight the YouTube page. Eric does an awesome job of creating these different videos that take you step by step on how to do things with maps and graphs, how to use specific indices. We will have one on there for the normalized burn ratio, the reports. And so highly encourage you checking those out. And I wanted to highlight this post-training user survey. We'll have an email go out after this, but please fill out the survey. It really helps us best understand how the materials we presented today are useful, how you could see using Climate Engine, and then suggestions on workflows that you would find interesting in your work. So those will be automatically sent out along with the recording. And yeah, and there's a couple additional slides for you to explore in there. But I'll say thank you and pass it back to, I guess, Tim and Eric to moderate any last questions on anything we presented today.
Eric,
Tim, do you at all want to speak to the scale discussion going on in the chat? I don't want you to perjure yourself.
Yeah, no.
It's a tough question.
It's a tough question, and there's a very rich discussion going on amongst the greater scientific community, but also within the fractional veg cover working group as well. And that group is specifically dedicated to rangelands across several agencies, and we're working to address some of those questions. It's a fantastic question. I wish we had a really easy answer. And I've been sidebarred by several colleagues during this call that are noticing a trend on some of these questions. They're really good. And again, I'm sorry we don't have straight answers. I wanted to quickly though thank our speakers today, Eric and Kristen. You guys did a fantastic job. This was a huge lift. And make sure I let everyone know that again the links are in the slides, and we will be sending out the recording of this very shortly. But certainly before we sign off, I saw Scott Miller come off of his of mute. Scott, would you like to say something?
Tim, I did not do that intentionally. So, but just want to thank everybody for attending today. I know folks are busy and there's a lot of different things competing for your time. Eric, Kristen, Tim, you did an excellent job with this training. So really thank you for your work, and really look forward to the topical trainings that are going to be forthcoming when we can take a deeper dive into some of the resource specific questions related to uplands, range, riparian, etc. So thank you for everybody's attendance today, and thank you to the presenters for your work.
Thank you, Scott. Apparently I was being an over attentive host there.
All good.
Yeah, and again, I'd like to acknowledge the links that Climate Engine and Eric and Kristen have put together on some of their on their YouTube channel, and some of those are pretty fantastic as well. Yeah, Kristen, nice job catching us back up, by the way. That was impressive.
Yeah, I'm glad. I hope everybody could follow along. But like I said, we have some great resources that slow it down and dive deeper in. So I hope people find that useful.
So, and it wasn't your first time giving that demo, I take it.
No.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention, you know, folks on the audience, I know many of you, but there's some of you I don't know. Feel free to reach out to myself or other names that were mentioned on this, but I'm happy to, if I can't answer the question, happy to put you in touch with someone that can. One of the other, yeah, and I'll stop there. Stop there.
One of the things I just wanted to add is that there were a lot of, I think, detailed questions, and there was, I think, a lot more to add in response to Aylin's question and some of the other questions that came up. And one of the things that we're really trying to do in the next year of this agreement is engage with specific groups who are trying to use Climate Engine in different ways and better understand some of those questions, work directly with those groups on how can you use our API or the Climate Engine web app to either support people who you're working with or address some specific questions. So I think that those types of requests will probably run through Tim, but would just encourage you to, think about coming out of this training, how either you or groups that you work on could, start to use some of these tools, and that we have time carved out in our agreement to help to support some of that, and that can help to inform future functionality and development that we might produce in our API or the app. So it's I think we learn a lot through that process. So just wanted to highlight that as well.
Yeah,
otherwise, it's been
absolutely.
it's yeah. I think I speak for all of us by saying that we really appreciate all of you attending and all of the engagement. It's often pretty tough, and you never know when you give an online training like this how much question and answer or engagement you're going to get. And I've really appreciated folks' questions and the lively discussion in the chat, and that's super encouraging. So I really appreciate all the participation, and we look forward to the upcoming sessions. Any other closing remarks, Tim or Kristen?
No, it was a pleasure. Thanks for joining, and we look forward to engaging more in the future.
Thank you, Kristen and Eric. I do have one final question. Do either of you, are we able through your list to send out the email, or in an email, send out the link to the recording in due time?
Yes, it's set up to automatically send out, and I'll be checking up to make sure that it's going to send out the slides, the survey, and the recording. But if there's some issue with that, I will follow up with Tim to make sure that we get it shared.
Great. Yeah, and we'll also, provided it's okay with the Climate Engine folks, we'll also make sure we get that on some other venues as well, like the BLM, AIM, remote sensing, SharePoint page, and a few other places as well. So hopefully there'll be some duplication and folks can find it. But again, certainly please reach out to me if you have any questions in the near future. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And again, thank you to Eric and Kristen. And we look forward to the additional thematic trainings coming sometime this fall. And for all of those of you on the audience, look for email correspondence for some more information on that in due time. And with that, I think we'll sign off. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.